Hi, everyone. My name is Rachel So. I'm the Senior Specialist of Digital Marketing and Communications here at CERIC. And on behalf of the CERIC team and our sponsor, the Labor Market Information Council, I'd like to welcome you to today's webinar. Today, we're delighted to start a new webinar series, which will delve into foreign credential recognition, workforce resilience amid an aging population, and insights from online job postings on current skill demands. For each webinar, we will be joined by different experts who will share resources and insights on these areas. We're pleased to start the series today with Ken Chatur, who will share insights on unraveling job postings with us. Before starting, I'd like to pay respect to the original peoples of the territory upon which I physically sit and acknowledge that I'm coming to you from Toronto. For thousands of years, it has been the traditional land of the Huron-Wendat, the Petun, the Haudenosaunee, the Anishinaabe, and the Mississauga Anishinaabe of New Credit. I acknowledge that the Indigenous people are the original stewards and caretakers of these lands and waters. CERC believes in taking land acknowledgements as an opportunity to share resources and learn towards advancing our collective efforts towards reconciliation. So today I'm sharing a resource that explores the number of treaties. These are a series of 11 treaties made between the Crown and First Nations between 1871 and 1921. Each treaty can be explored in more detail with information on its history, written terms, outside promises, and issues with modern day interpretation. So I'll have Ola from our team sharing that resource with you in the chat. Now, I'd like to take a few moments to introduce you to CERIC and share some housekeeping notes. So, for those of you who don't know us yet, CERIC is a charitable organization focusing on education and research in the careers counseling and career development in Canada. We fund projects that create new knowledge and develop innovative resources. We have three main programs. We have Connexus, which is Canada's career development conference held each January, both virtually and in person, and we're celebrating our 20th anniversary of Connexus this year. We have the careerwise.ca website, which helps with the news and features the top news and views in the field with the French version called orientation.ca. And we also have the Canadian Journal of Career Development, which publishes relevant research on career development and is completely free to access. CERIC regularly hosts live webinars in addition to providing training and courses to support your professional development. And you can learn more about CERIC's work and resources by visiting our website at ceric.ca. Also, we inform our learning initiatives based on your feedback and needs. So we'd encourage you to share your learning needs for 2025 in the survey that we'll be sending at the end of this webinar and at the end of the series. Thank you in advance for taking the time to provide us with your valuable inputs. Now for some housekeeping notes. During today's session, you can use the Zoom Q&A to interact with your audience and answer or ask questions to our presenter. We also have a recording for this webinar, so we're going to be providing you a copy of the recording within 2 days after today's webinar, along with materials for the webinar. And lastly, we have AI-generated captions and subtitles available in several languages. If you want to enable these captions, click on the CC button located at the bottom of your Zoom window and select the Show Subtitle button to view subtitles in real time. We'd also like to thank our generous sponsor, the Labor Market Information Council, for co-hosting this webinar series with us. It's thanks to their contribution that we're able to offer these series in an accessible way that has no cost to you at all. So I'm happy to say welcome to the LMIC. We're also thrilled to introduce to you our presenter, Ken Chatur. Ken is the Director of Research and Strategic Foresight at LMIC. He brings a wealth of experience on education, labor market, and equity with a proven track record of driving evidence-based policymaking. He has also played a role in shaping impactful initiatives contributing to government evaluations and research on critical issues such as mental health, funding structures in public services, work integrated learning, and the labor market transition for new graduates. So I'm very pleased to hand over the stage to Ken so he can officially start today's webinar. Over to you, Ken.
Thank you, Rachel. It's a pleasure to be with all of you today, and thank you to CERIC as well for working with us on this. So I'm Ken Chatur, the Director of Research and Strategic Foresight at the Labor Market Information Council, or LMIC. We want to make sure you're all engaged today, so just a heads up, we're going to be using a tool called Mentimeter to engage with you throughout our presentation. In the meantime, I encourage you to share your role and where you're joining us from today. Next slide, please. So first, a bit about us. Originally launched in 2017, LMIC exists to address current and long-standing challenges in Canada's often fragmented and siloed labor market information system. We work at the intersection of the federal government and Canada's 13 provinces and territories. We also work with the Forum of Labor Market Ministers, or FLMN, to identify and work on labor market information issues. The goal of our work is to help identify and address gaps in accessibility and consistency in labor market information. We also aim to foster collaboration across the pan-Canadian landscape. And by doing so, we can advance better labor market information that will empower Canadians to make better decisions about the world of work and workforce planning. Next slide, please. So Canada's labor market information ecosystem is dynamic and changing, with data and contributions coming from a wide range of sources: individual governments, private organizations, research agencies, but especially increasingly private firms. So how does LMIC fit into all of this? LMIC acts as a knowledge broker. We connect the disparate parts of our ecosystem to address and prioritize key challenges. We also try to not reinvent the wheel. Our work is meant to complement the research and data produced by organizations like Statistics Canada, as well as academic researchers, and to make sure the information we share is practical and impactful for all Canadians. The goal of all of this is to provide information and insights that are timely, accessible, and actionable for a wide range of audiences. Next slide, please. So before we go further, I should clarify what we mean by labor market information, or LMI, because I'm going to use that term a lot today. At the highest level, labor market information, or LMI, is anything that provides timely, relevant, and accurate information about the labor market and helps you make decisions related to that labor market. It can manifest in multiple ways. For example, LMI can be information based on numbers like statistics related to employment and wages. It could also look like occupational trends and future employment forecasts. LMI can also be the information that Canadians use to make informed decisions about their careers, including through informal networks or qualitative information. Today, though, our focus will be on the quantitative LMI we use to support career decision-making. Quantitative LMI, like statistics on wages, can be crucial to empower Canadians to make informed and strategic decisions that work best for individual needs. Next slide, please. So now that you have a bit of a sense of who we are and what we do, let's get into our topic today, connecting skills. This is a publication developed by LMIC senior economist and data scientist, Laura Adkins-Hackett and Sukriti Trahan. They aim to make sense of the world of skills in online job postings. Next slide, please. So why does this matter, though? Well, for one, I'm sure many of us in the audience here have applied to a job posting online. It's fair to say that at times the information in job postings can sometimes be overwhelming and confusing, especially if you're an active job seeker who is spending a lot of time looking for jobs. But it also matters from an employer perspective too. For employers, making sure that job postings are communicating the right skills, make sure you're finding the right candidates. This can have all sorts of organizational impacts, particularly the time and resources spent on the hiring process. Next slide, please. So why is LMIC working on this? So I've shared why this matters to job seekers and employers, but I'm going to tell you a bit about why we did work on this. First, LMIC works to build consensus and understanding around what LMI is available for what and how it should be used. Secondly, we know from conversations that we have with various levels of government and institutions across Canada that online job postings have rapidly become a source of LMI. Third, demonstrating the potential and providing best practices for using data is core to our mandate. And finally, sharing methodology is crucial for a shared pan-Canadian understanding. It's just simply best practice. Next slide, please. Now, this is a CERIC webinar, and so I know there might be a lot of CDPs on this call. So why should any of this matter to you? Career development professionals are at the front lines of supporting Canadians' career ambitions and journeys. Key to this is empowering Canadians to become self-aware of their skills, being able to communicate them, and knowing which skills are most important for their career ambitions. Using emerging sources of LMI to find innovative ways to understand the relationship between skills and occupations could boost your confidence and the agency of your clients as they navigate their career journey. Next slide, please. So now that you know why this issue matters, let's talk a bit about the project itself. The problem this work aimed to address is that the same skills language is often used across online job postings. So skills that are listed in online job postings can make it hard to distinguish what is actually required for the job. In other words, if skills in a job posting don't represent reality, it limits the value of online job postings as a source of LMI. Some of us in our own lives may have experienced seeing a great job, but then being super thrown off by a particular requirement or skill and not really knowing how important it really is. To better understand this problem, this research aimed to find connections in online job postings to extract additional insights into the needs of the labor market. To do so, we examined the changes in skill connections across occupations. By doing this, we enhance these online job postings as an analytical tool. And what we do in this report is we show the importance of context when deciphering job postings. And it just takes a big step in using online job postings to identify potential skill shortages or mismatches. Next slide, please. Now, before we get into the details of the research, let's talk about a few definitions so that we can all get on the same page. First, let's ask ourselves a question that seems kind of obvious. What is a skill? In our context, skills are abilities gained through knowledge and experience that help individuals perform a task effectively. You're probably familiar with many examples of this, whether it's soft skills or technical skills, things like communication, coding, data analysis. And LMIC actually made a video that we'll share in the chat that's of a very short YouTube video that explains what skills mean in our context. Next slide, please. Okay, you've heard me mention online job postings, or what I'll refer to as from now on as OJP, a lot today already. But I'm sure there's some of you who are not super familiar with this term. Online job postings, or OJP, are digital advertisements for job openings that employers post online. So this could be on employment websites you're all probably familiar with, so like your LinkedIn, Indeed, the Canadian Job Bank, and so on. Technology has enabled us to scrape online job postings from the web and use their information to create organized data sets on skill requirements, occupation, company, and sometimes even salary. Sometimes companies will use machine learning or artificial intelligence tools to clean, organize, and create taxonomies of skills out of the data from these job postings. This creates an employer-centric perspective of demand for jobs and skills in the labor market. Next slide, please. But why are OJPs such a big deal, and why are so many people adopting them as a data source? OJP offer high-frequency data. This data can be as recent as a few weeks old after validation procedures. OJP also provide a high level of granularity at often a very local level that administrative surveys generally cannot. They also share a direct insight into what and how employers are seeking employees. This makes them useful to complement existing surveys like Statistics Canada's Job Vacancy and Wage Survey. And you can use these together to support strategic workforce planning, strategic enrollment, and understand acute and local labor market dynamics. But OJP, like any data set, have some limitations and caveats. For one, a job vacancy and an online job posting are not the same thing. Job vacancies are economic constructs with lots of parameters, for example, set by Statistics Canada. OJP can also have biases and over-underrepresentation like any other data set, with some evidence around overrepresentation of what we might call white-collar jobs and jobs in cities. And of course, OJP cannot reflect private and internal job postings or job postings posted physically, like a physical sign you might see at a local small business. So we recommend thinking of OJP as a complement to other sources of data, something that can help create a more fulsome and accurate picture of the labor market that no single data set can really do. Okay, now that we've talked a bit about online job postings, we're curious to learn about how many folks in attendance have used or are aware of online job postings. So we have our first Mentimeter. If you go in the chat, you will see we just posted it. And we want to know, do you or your department use online job postings? Whoa, That's almost all of you. That's really interesting. Okay. So we got 59 to 7, close to 90% so far. I have to say, I'm a little surprised, but pleasantly surprised to see that so many folks are using this data source. Okay. We're sticking it around 90% of everyone on this call so far who's responded, saying they use online job postings. My gosh, we might get up to 95%. Okay, I think we have a pretty clear idea of our crowd today and how people are using this source of data. So let's move on to our next slide. Okay, so now let's really get into things. I'm going to, oh, and before we go on, I'd love for you to share which online job posting data you're using as well. You know, there's a lot of folks use Vicinity Jobs, Talent Neuron, Lightcast as well. So feel free to share that in the chat too. Okay, let's really get into things now. And I'm going to walk you through things step by step, and be warned, things are going to get a little mathy, but I don't want you to get bogged down into the technical stuff. Just focus on what the technical stuff can tell us. Okay, so first, let's look at the most basic information. And just so you know, we use Vicinity Jobs for all our data today. In 2023, there were over 3 million job postings that collectively had more than 20 million requirements, more than 4,500 of which were actually unique and specific to a job posting. That is an almost inconceivable amount of skills and requirements to have to think about, right? Well, to make things a bit easier and more relevant, we set a threshold where a requirement had to appear in no less than 500 job postings to be counted. When we did that, we go down to a bit over 700 requirements. Now, that's still kind of a lot, but it makes sense when we consider that there are more than 500 unique occupations in Canada, according to federal classification. That's using the NOC codes, which some of you may be familiar with. Next slide, please. Okay, so now that we have a bit of a lay of the land, let's count some skills. So a first and most simple way to look at skills is just to count them. Frequency counts are great because they're easy to interpret and explain. This is important as we can understand the basics of our data at the highest level, and it can help us think about the kinds of questions that we want to dive deeper into. So, what do we see when we count skills? Unsurprisingly, we see that social and emotional skills dominate the most frequently requested skills. This isn't surprising, as these skills tend to be transferable across many occupations. Teamwork and communication are the most common, followed by the one occupational skill, customer service, because there are a lot of retail jobs in Canada. Next slide, please. But we want to know not just the most commonly requested skills, but where those skills show up. Now, I don't want you to get lost in this image, just the takeaway. What you're looking at here is a heat map. We have skills in high-level occupation at both axes. The darker the color, the more frequently the skills appear in the occupation. This is a really neat way to get a bird's eye view of skills across many occupations. Next slide, please. We can even map these skills out by provinces in Canada, which is super neat and potentially reveal regional nuances in skill requirements. Underlying this could be different regional differences in concentration of sectors and occupations. For example, we know that there are more oil and gas jobs in Alberta and perhaps more fishing jobs in parts of Atlantic Canada. You could probably spend a lot of time looking at these last two figures. And I'll just remind you, you can find this in our publication online if you want to do just that after our webinar today. Okay, next slide, please. So now that we've counted skills, we can go to the next step, connecting skills. Here, I'll share how we identified and measured skill associations. Next slide, please. So there are many ways to examine the relationship between skills and occupations. So far, we've looked at frequency counts, which is a descriptive statistic. Descriptive statistics like frequency can give us a count of how many times a certain skill appears in job postings. This is great. However, this approach does not paint the full picture, as purely descriptive statistics can sometimes mask true association between variables. So to better understand the nuances and the nature of relationships between skills and occupation, we need to use inferential statistics. So now things are going to get a bit mathy, but again, don't get lost in the details, just the takeaway. The inferential measurement we're going to use today is called pointwise mutual information, or PMI. PMI measures the frequency of two skills co-occurring. We can use this to identify relationships between them. Normalized pointwise mutual information, or NPMI, is a variation of PMI that we use in this study. And that's what you'll see me referring to for the rest of this webinar. Why do we use NPMI? NPMI creates an output that is much easier to interpret than PMI. We will exclusively be using NPMI because of this. Next slide, please. Okay, so how do you interpret this? NPMI exists on a scale between -1 and +1. If you're at -1, that means the skills never occur together. If the NPMI is 0, that means the skills are independent or random to each other. And if an NPMI is 1, that indicate the skills always occur together. So that's our scale for NPMI. Simple enough, right? I mean, I hope so. And to just take a breather and a pause for a second, we want to share another Mentimeter with you. Since I know we're covering some math-heavy topics, we have another poll, and it's just a bit of a temperature check. Why would you want to use an inferential technique to understand the relationship between skills instead of frequencies? See all of the above. Yes, it can reveal the nuances that frequency counts alone can hide. It is fun. I'm glad someone else thinks it's fun. If you're a statistics nerd like me, it can be quite fun. And yes, we can differentiate something that just happens to occur with something else versus the genuine relationships that are occurring between skills. I was curious to see how many it's fun. Unfortunately, it's fun has slipped to number 4, but that's fine. But it is covered in all of the above, so I accept that. Okay. Thank you for responding to these polls, by the way. I think we can move on to our next slide now. So we have our method, right? NPMI. So now let's actually connect skills and see what happens. Let's go to the next slide. So for the rest of the presentation, I will be using communication as a case study skill to demonstrate what we did. Why communication? Communication is one of the most commonly requested skills across all job postings. Communication is also something we would expect to be connected to many other kinds of skills. This makes it both a perfect candidate to test this measure, but also kind of a challenging one. After all, it's communication. It's connected to so many things. So let's go to the next slide where we'll show you the frequency counts. So to show you the power of NPMI, I'm first going to show you the skills that most frequently appear with communication. Just a simple count, none of the fun math involved. And when we do that, we see that teamwork and customer service and interpersonal skills appear the most. That's cool, but a bit expected. In fact, it looks a lot like our general most frequently appearing skills across all job postings. But what's going on underneath these numbers? Well, that's where NPMI comes in quite handy. So let's go to our next slide. And here you'll see NPMI. When we use NPMI, we see things change a lot. In fact, it doesn't really resemble the frequency counts when we look closely. Looking at actual association as opposed to simple occurrence, we see a more nuanced picture of what communication skills are often associated with. Some of the top skills here are analytical skills, flexibility, and even being a self-starter pop up. We also just see more tool and equipment skills as well as occupational skills showing up. So the profile of the screen, oh, I'm seeing some folks saying they, okay, some folks can and can't see the screen. Hopefully that gets sorted out. So let's move to the next slide. Okay, so we've just showed you a new way to better understand the nuances in skill relationships. That's neat, but wouldn't it be great to anticipate or predict what skills might appear when another appears? Think about how helpful that might be to a client, especially if they have like a really particular skill set. Well, we have a way to do that. So let's predict some skills. And yes, we will be sharing the PowerPoint and recording after this workshop for anyone that's on the call and wants to look later, or maybe is having some technical difficulties. Okay, let's go to the next slide. What do I mean by predicting skills, though? And why would we even want to do that? NPMI provides valuable insight into connections between skills, but it does not fully capture the specific relationships with other skills due to the broad applicability of a skill like communication. To address this, we use a predictive measure to understand the directional relationship between communication and other skills. So when we go to the next slide, when we do that, we can actually see the percentage probability that a skill will show up with communication. And now we see some very different skills show up. Presentation skills, writing, conflict management, and negotiation appear pretty highly. We can also see how each measure that we've gone through today, frequency, NPMI, and prediction, give us something somewhat different. Depending on who you're helping or if you're just doing your own independent exploration, one of these methodologies might be a bit better than the other. And this might especially become useful if you're dealing with someone who comes from a very particular occupational background with really specific skills. So I am pleased to tell everyone that we are done with the math. But before we move on, I want to make sure we are taking away things in a meaningful way. So I have another Mentimeter question for you. And it's just a reflection on what we've talked about today. Why would we want to predict a skill and not just connect it? Yep, predicting skills gives us a better idea of what other skills a job seeker should expect to have if another skill is present. Yes, all of the above. I'm going to count that as its fun representation. Connecting and predicting skills gives us the whole picture instead of just a partial one. Connecting skills alone does miss nuances for very common skills like teamwork and connection. So predicting skills can give you stuff that's a bit more specific and maybe instructional if you're working with a client, for example. Okay, thank you so much for responding to these polls, by the way. It gives us a better idea of, how these types of inferential techniques could be useful for you as well. So I appreciate everyone who's responding. Why don't we move on to the next slide? So what did we learn about communication based on what we just went through? We learned that writing stands out as a top predictor for communication skills. What that confidence level of 83% means is that 8 out of every 10 postings requesting a writing skill will also mention communication skills. And that strong connection aligns with the high NPMI association between the two that we saw earlier. Writing is intrinsically tied to communication, reinforcing the need for writing skills. Now let's move on to the next slide. So what can you take away from this research that we showed you today? I think there are 4 big takeaways that we'd like you to walk away with. OJP offer a rich source of employer perspective data to better understand the current needs of the labor market. Secondly, we can use OJP to better understand in-demand skills in different occupations. Third, there are multiple methods for measuring the relevance of skills. And fourth, our NPMI and predictive statistics allow for more nuanced interpretation of in-demand skills. Okay, so now I want to say, I know how busy CDPs are. I worked in education for 8 years before I joined LMIC, so I know that. And chances are most of you don't have time for fun data science experiments. And you may not even have access to OJP. I know in these times, money and resources and time are tight, but with the advancement of digital tools like dashboards, we can eventually hope to integrate these techniques to do this inferential work so that you don't have to. In that hopefully soon future, you can have access to powerful data with powerful metrics developed for you to support your clients in your own strategic thinking. The more that we understand the possibility of what we can do with data, the more we can get out of it. So while I don't expect folks to be running complex stats after this call, although I kind of hope you do, I hope you walk away from this hopeful about the possibilities of better tools and metrics to support your clients in the future. So I have some more stuff to share with you, specifically the Canadian Jobs Trends Dashboard. And I'd be remiss to not share it with you. It's one of LMIC's in-house developed tools. And before we get into it, I'd like to learn if how many of you are familiar with it. So we're going to share another Mentimeter poll, and I'm seeing, let's see where we're at here. Okay, seems like we're at about 20% of folks are familiar with this tool so far. Maybe 25%. And yes, I'm doing the mental math in my head because I love doing that. Okay, that's not bad. So about a fifth of folks are have used the tool and are familiar with it. And I'm excited to share with those of you who aren't familiar with it what the Canadian Jobs Trend Dashboard is, because I think a lot of you will find it really useful once you get a chance to use it. Okay. Thank you for sharing. Let's move on to our next slide. So I just showed you a bunch of really cool ways that we can use vicinity jobs data. That's what we use for all of our data. Did you know that you can access vicinity jobs data too and for free? Because that's what the Canadian Jobs Trends dashboard is powered by. Now, it's not going to allow you to do all the really cool and fancy inferential statistics I just showed you, but it can show you some really cool stuff that, given who's in the audience today, I think you'll find really interesting and valuable. So I'm just going to share with you some of the kinds of questions and scenarios where the CJTD might come in handy. A heads up though, the CJTD is currently undergoing maintenance, so you can't access it today. But once it is up and running, please reach out to us if you have any questions. When it comes back up, we're always happy to do demonstrations for folks to show you all of the kinds of ways you can use it. So let's go to the next slide. I'm going to share with you some of the kinds of questions that you can ask on behalf of your clients using the CJTD. You can ask what occupations are in highest demand for your region, what skills are most sought after in your local town or city, because you can get down to a really granular level. What are the top requested skills for an occupation? Like, for example, what are the most requested skills for a registered nurse? What occupations most frequently require a skill? Like, what occupations is writing most important, for example? And how has the demand for a skill or occupation changed over time? Which, given everything that's going on right now with the Canadian economy, is especially useful to be able to look at, especially in your own local context. And you can do all of that with just one tool. So subscribe to our mailing list and look out for when the CJTD comes back up. And again, remember, you can always reach out to us to learn more about how to use it and even for us to do a demo for you. Okay, so before we move on to questions, let's take another breather and just, do a little temperature check. How are we feeling right now? And let's go to the Mentimeter and see how people are feeling. I am actually so hungry as well. I love skills, yes. Oh, I'm so happy to see folks saying they learned something new today. Take that as a big victory. Even though during lunch hour that, I learned something new is like 4-1 to hungry is pretty good. Yeah, a few folks are mathed out. And yes, we all love skills. Okay. I'm pleased to see that people are mostly well fed. I think I'm the one that I'm the one that needs to grab a sandwich after. Okay. I'm so happy to see folks saying they feel like they learned something new today. That's awesome. Thank you guys so much for all of your attention. and for engaging with us throughout this presentation. We really appreciate it, and we hope you had some fun despite all of some of the hard math that we did today. Why don't we open the floor for questions? And I'll pass it over to Rachel, who's going to moderate some of those for us.
Hey Ken, thanks so much for the presentation. I'm so glad to see everyone participating and chatting. We do have a number of questions, so happy to start us off. And with a couple of upvotes, let me see what we have here. So someone is saying, I understand a number of jobs online is not an accurate indicator of the job prospect. Is there any other way to analyze the job prospect in terms of supply and demand ratio based on the job postings?
Oh, that is a great question. And it is something that economists are always trying to figure out the best way to disseminate that information. There are a few different tools that you can use to really drill down into labor market imbalances, which I feel like is at the core of what this question is about. Employment and Social Development Canada, or ESDC, has a tool called the COPS model. It's the Canadian Occupational Projection System. And we can share that link in the chat for folks who are interested. Gab from LMIC just shared that. And basically, that tool is based on a combination of a ton of different quantitative metrics, but also qualitative metrics, because ESDC talks to different parts of the labor market and different, for example, like occupational associations to get a sense of what they think is happening in terms of supply and demand in the labor market. That is a great place to start. It is more national level, but you can request provincial level information as well if you reach out to them directly. But I'm gonna, give a push for the CJTD and online job postings again. What's neat about them is that their data is so high frequency and recent that you can actually look at trends over time in your own local region, which other data sets you can't necessarily do. The job vacancy and wage survey is the other data set from Statistics Canada that I would strongly recommend using if you really want to get into this, in part because of the rigorousness and robustness of the data that's used. But yes, the ESDC COPS model is kind of one of the places to go to look at those labor market imbalances.
Great. Thank you so much for sharing. I believe after the webinar, we should be sending some of the links out too, just so that everyone has access to all of the resources that Ken is mentioning. Um, Let me go to the next question we have here. So, are all LMI tools moving in the direction of matching client skill sets to job markets or market jobs? What are the challenges in doing this?
Ooh, I love that question. I think as technology and data continue to improve, we will hopefully be able to move towards a world where we're able to do more individual, like basically creating individual profiles for clients, because even just 5 or 10 years ago, I think for a lot of us, having access to instant data was quite challenging, either because it's expensive or kind of hard to use, or you had to figure out how to clean the data. But what we're seeing now are more tools being developed by, whether it's the CJTD by LMIC, some of Statistics Canada and ESDC's tool, or the Conference Board also has Opportunext in the MOST model that folks can easily access. It allows you to get the information of the client right in front of you. Say, for example, you know, they work say for example you work at a WSIB as like a client officer and you want a new job, you can kind of enter the job that that person currently has, see the skills that are most associated with it. Another tool I will shout out is called Oasis, also by ESDC. And that is a really neat tool where you could enter someone's current occupation and it shows you all of the most commonly described skills. Uh, and then you can use those skills and map it out onto other tools. So you can kind of create a fun web between all of these different tools to just create an individual profile. And I think that that's maybe the way of the future because you can help people a bit more directly using the LMI that's available. Or at least this is my dream of individualized data.
That is super cool. I was able to search up the Oasis tool online, so we can send that in the chat afterwards as well.
Yeah,
Um,
and I will say that the Oasis tool, the COPS model, as well as the CJTD really complement each other because they each offer something a little different. And between the three of them, you can really have a lot of fun with how you play around with skills. I saw a lot of people love skills here. So you
Yeah, we're
guys are going to be
speaking to
able
the
to
right
go to
audience.
town with all of these tools that I'm mentioning for you.
Yeah, and as mentioned in the chat already, the CJTD, so similar to something we have, CJTD will be back up in May. So, don't sleep on that. Get back to it at the end of May when that's back up and running. But besides that, Ken has some other options for us.
Yeah, I would love to mention one more tool. You can tell I get really excited about data and skills and tools and super cool like that. For those of you who may be serving veterans or people coming out of the military, there's also a fantastic tool called MNet MOSED. And I know it's a very weird name, but basically it's a tool where a veteran can enter the job they had while they're in the military, and it creates an equivalency for civilian life as folks want to transition back into the civilian world of work. So I also want to mention that's a really important tool for those of us who might be helping veterans as well.
That's a fantastic tool, it sounds like. I'm actually noting it down for ourselves because we have a webinar coming up for military to civilian transition. So we'll definitely be
Yes.
taking a peek at that. Thank you for sharing, Ken. All right, we do still have plenty of questions, so I'm going to continue on here. And this one's a popular one. But do you have tips to identify scams, fake, or inactive old OJPs?
So vicinity jobs, one of the reasons that they're really fantastic is that they have developed, I mentioned that sometimes we use like machine learning and AI to be able to make the value of this information better. So vicinity jobs actually does do deduplication because there are a few things, right? Like you might post a job on Indeed, LinkedIn, and your own company website. They have deduplication techniques to make sure that just one is being counted and not three. They've also developed, and as again, technology gets better, it will get better at identify fake job postings. Um, I believe that that number is consistently going down each year as technology gets better. Um, and we will share, I see folks are asking about the military tool. Um, it's called MNet.
Mosted, right? I believe
Yes.
I put that in the chat just now.
Oh, great. Thank you.
Absolutely. Great. Thank you for sharing. Another question kind of similar to what we just had, and that was in the chat a bit, but how do you account for ghost jobs in the data?
Ghost jobs. I would love a definition of ghost jobs. Sounds spooky. Uh,
But I also have been seeing questions or notes about,
okay.
there are many jobs online that are already filled. And when working with a client, I go to the company or website and need to call to confirm that the job is still available. So essentially like the postings that are probably internally filled or something along those lines. Um,
Mm. Okay, so ghost jobs or are basically fake jobs, jobs that are not real. And I imagine a few of us have experienced that from time to time. Yes, jobs to scam people. And I believe that Vicinity Jobs, as well as Lightcast and Talent Neuron, they have brilliant developers working for them. And so they try to develop algorithms and other things that can, through various techniques, identify jobs that are real versus jobs that are fake. But this is an ongoing challenge, especially it's kind of like a race between the fake posters and the people who are trying to find the fake posters. But my understanding is it's not a massive part of the OJP, uh, especially after all of the cleaning and verification that they do. With vicinity jobs, I know they're quite thorough with the data that they produce.
Perfect. Thank you for advising, Ken. Our next question we have is also from an anonymous attendee saying, can you comment on the interplay of technical and interpersonal slash soft skills? Can NPMIs be used for that?
Yes. So, it depends on how you want to construct that question. So you might start off with looking at one skill and you might try to sort of run the statistics that we showed and see how each one has a different set of skills that are connected to it. In terms of doing an analysis with both or three skills together. One thing that's really neat about the association stuff that we did at the end, the predictive stuff, is you can actually look at it in two directions, right? Because the way that communication might predict writing might be different than the way that writing predicts communication, which is a little confusing, but you can look at it in different directions depending on how you construct the query. And by the way, in our report, we go way deeper into the statistics. Full disclosure, I'm not a data scientist, so I'm not going to try to answer it 100% there, but I would definitely check out the report for way more detail on the methodology.
Sounds fantastic. And for everyone's reference, we will be sending the report after this webinar ends so that you all have access to that as well as all of the resource that Ken is mentioning. Back to the dashboard and hidden job market. Your dashboard is based on published job postings. What about the hidden job market? Do you have any information about it?
You know, that is a really great question because the hidden job market can manifest in many different ways, right? It might be jobs that are completely inaccessible to job scrapers, that are hidden behind company paywalls or just like, private company stuff. You might also have jobs that are, I mentioned jobs that are posted just on Windows of local small businesses or things that are shared exclusively through word of mouth. And I'm sure we're all familiar with jobs that are posted perhaps internally where kind of already know is going to get hired, right? And these are really difficult things to account for in data. And it is a real challenge. Just how much of that makes up the total amount of the data that we're looking at is my understanding is quite small. But it's absolutely something that is difficult to get access to. But this is why I recommend, and I mentioned this in the presentation, using online job postings as a complement to StatsCan data, because one of the things that StatsCan does with the job vacancy and wage survey is they actually do survey employers who can tell them about perhaps jobs that they're posting that cannot be captured by online job postings because they're directly interviewing or surveying uh, different employers. So that's why you want to look at multiple data sets to get the full picture of how things are going.
Fantastic. Um, Another question from another attendee is, are there more high job profile websites such as Indeed that we should avoid due to bad data?
I can't speak to any specific job poster. I think as a job seeker, it's always challenging no matter where you go. I will say that the information that Vicinity Jobs uses is based on a lot of different spaces that post job postings. And I mentioned the deduplication efforts to make sure they're not accounting between different ones. Um, but I can't say that I have an answer to that, but I think it often comes down to individual discretion.
I think that's a fair thing to say. Um, Next question from Jan. With no experience and little knowledge about LMI, how can I get the information that could help me support candidates who are on a goal path to apprenticeship and skilled trades?
Oh my gosh, fantastic question. In at LMIC, one of the things that we're going to be doing some work on is explicitly on that, the pathways into trades and apprenticeship. We have a lot of labor market shortages, specifically in the trades and apprenticeship. And there's a big question around what is the labor market information that's being disseminated, especially to young people who are trying to understand, is this a viable pathway to me? And even if it is, how do I even do it? I'm not going to lie to you, the information can at times be confusing to navigate because there's so many different trades associations, there are many different pathways. You might go to a polytechnic, you might do it through a union or through a college, or specifically through an employer. It's not easy, especially if you're someone who's doesn't have a family member who works in the trades or apprenticeship. Um, I would say the first thing that I would do is I would ask the person, what are the specific trades you're interested in? And you can actually go to the CJTD, not to plug our CJTD again, and you can look up, what are the most commonly requested skills? What is the trends with these? What are the trends in terms of the vacancies of these jobs? You can also, again, go to those, you can go to the Canadian Job Bank, which will give you a great summary of statistics, including things like wages, um, potentially things like education that's required. I would also recommend, again, the ESDC COPS model and OASIS because they can show you the skills required for specific occupations. But this is something that we are working on, and we're excited to talk to folks to learn about how we can maybe streamline this system a bit better for people.
Fantastic. And thank you, Gabrielle, for adding those links in the chat for COPS and Oasis. And again, CJTD down for now, but back at the end of May, and that's right around the corner. So we won't be missing that. And a lot of people have been excited to use it. So no worries for multiple plugs. We're here for it. We have a question from Sean. It says, has there been work done to assess employer understanding and confidence related to skills? For example, if an employer lists communications as a skill, it presumes that they understand the skills at a fundamental level.
Mhm. Yeah. I think this is where online job postings become both, as I said earlier, like it can be both kind of a gift and a curse because it's like technically you have all of this information in front of you. But if you can't figure out, is this actually that important? That can be really challenging. So that's why some of the statistics that I showed earlier, like NPMI and the predictive skills, can start giving you more specificity about not just, okay, you're asking for communication, but what are the things that people usually mean when they say communication? That's when we saw writing and negotiation skills pop up, right? And so I think that's a space where those inferential statistics can start coming in really handy. But it is one of the neatest things about online job postings is it's like we have directly from the employers what they're telling us in their job postings that they want.
And something similar to, if you can speak to it at least, someone's mentioning from Rosanna, considering communication is one of the top soft skill for
Mhm.
job seekers, how does that impact individuals with English as a second language?
Oh, wow. So that's a great question. It was not something that our research was able to get into. It was mostly a demonstration project. But I think that would be the researcher in me immediately is like, that would be a fantastic research project to investigate that, either through a survey or qualitative research, which we, of course, didn't do in this project. But I definitely think that would be an interesting thing to look at in research.
No worries there. And yeah, great question from the audience. Good to have that
Yeah.
critical thinking in. Another anonymous attendee is asking if you know the answer, how does your tool differ or compare to the WorkBC embedded LMI?
Oh. I do
Right.
not know the answer to that,
Okay.
but I would love to learn more about that. Whoever wrote that question, please feel free to share that with us.
Fantastic. If you want to put that in the chat, feel
Yeah.
free to do that, and maybe we can follow up afterwards, and we will be sending some of the resources.
What I will say though is, one of the great challenges in our country with data is around granularity of data. And so I think it's fantastic because I know several provinces and ministries and organizations have developed their own tools specific to their province or their local region. And I always recommend people try to find those resources because often the question we hear is, this is great, but like my local community, I need to learn more. So I think sharing those resources is a really great thing. And if there are folks in the call who can share local resources that maybe you do with folks on the call, that would be great.
I think that's fair. Um, let's see what else we have here. Um, there's one about which is the best tool that someone can offer to a student transitioning from the trades back into post-secondary and into a new industry.
Why the CJTD, of course. No, there are many tools. I have to plug LMIC's tools, right? Um, so the question is someone who, can you repeat the last part of the question?
Yeah. So it's for a student transitioning from the trades back into post-secondary and into a new industry.
Wow. Well, I think I would start off by trying to understand what are the skills that they had from working in that trade. I do a lot of career coaching with my friends as well. I'm working in this sector for so long. I've just somehow become that person for people in my life. And the place that I always start off with are tell me what you think your skills are. Because often, as someone who switched careers myself, I was in biomedical engineering and cancer research before I switched into this very different world. And I remember feeling like, oh, I have to go back to school, or even if I go back to school, I have to start all over again. I don't have any skills that are transferable to this world of policy. But the thing is, most people have so many transferable skills. And so I would want to start off with that person to identify all of the amazing experience and skills they had from their previous occupation, in addition to what they learned in the post-secondary program that they did. And I think the Oasis tool allows you to do that because you can enter things by occupation, um, as well as the CJTD can give you some of that information. And from there, then start to build out, what your resume looks like, depending on the job you're trying to get. Um, and perhaps spaces where you might be surprised, where some of the previous experience might be applicable. I just think it's often, I meet so many people who think, oh, I don't have the skills to go into this job. And I'm like, but you might though. You might be surprised. And so I think it's so important to empower people with that knowledge so that they can have more agency as they're navigating um, something that can be really difficult for anyone on the call like me who's switched careers before. It can be really scary. And so knowledge is such an empowering thing I found in that situation. And also talk to your CDP, your local CDP. I know we're talking about all of these different tools, but I know we're on a CERIC call, and I can't emphasize enough how much my career professional development person literally changed my life and helped me on the pathway. So yes, these tools are amazing, but also it's amazing when you also have someone who can help guide you through the process. So I just want to emphasize that, the human element of it too. Like shout out to our CDPs.
Thank you so much for sharing your personal experience as well. And I'm sure everyone in the call are just hands up, clapping and like agreeing with you. I think I'll do maybe one or two more questions. We have a question or a note. One common mistakes that the job seekers do is that they target one job title. How do the job
My
seekers find
God.
suitable job or jobs related to the title to widen their job search?
I'm going through this through one of my friends that I'm helping right now, actually. She's like, I want this one really specific job. And I'm like, why? And I think this is why it's so helpful to, you know, it's so helpful to be able to sit with someone across from you who can be kind of a mirror and kind of ask you, why do you think that? And have you thought about these different options? And I think through all of the different tools that we talked about today, what's neat about them is you can enter either an occupation or a skill, and then it shows you possibilities. And I think in addition to, talking about skills and occupations, you might just want to hear what is that person really looking for, whether it's flexibility of work or values or how busy they want to be during the day. I think there are all of these other things around what we're talking about that can help someone figure out the different occupations that might be closely related to each other. So I'll just also mention that part as well. And the CJTD, I'm just going to say, can help you with that as well.
We're all going to be looking forward to and putting in our calendar that CJTD is coming back at the end of May. So I'm sure everyone's going to be looking to your website then. We're almost at the hour, but I do have one note here. HR is using the word competencies instead of skills. Do you make any difference between the two?
I can't really speak to that. I know terminology, especially in research and in sectors, often change from time to time. When we use a term like skills, it is based on a somewhat academic construct. So I'll just leave that there. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's fair. I'm going to do some closeout, but I really want to thank again Ken for the fantastic presentation, incredible engagement with our audience, and for answering all of these questions. We really, really appreciate it. Thank you to LMIC for co-partnering with us for this webinar series. Of course, the next webinar is coming up on June 2nd. So if you haven't registered already, you're not automatically registered. Make sure to go to the CERIC website to register for that. And we will also share that in the follow-up email. We'll also be sharing the recording, resources, and anything that was mentioned in this webinar in that follow-up webinar. As for ourselves, we have a couple of follow-up notes that we want to share with you all before we close out for the day. But some upcoming opportunities that are coming up. Tomorrow, we're actually starting a new webinar series. It's called Working with Grief, Shame, and Regret, Uncovering Career Transition Potential. And this will explore the impact of loss and grieving on career services. You can still register for this webinar series, even though it begins tomorrow. Um, we were also talking about military to civilian transitions. If you're interested in that, we have another free webinar coming up on May 5th with our panelists from the military to civilian book that we launched earlier this year. It's going to help you understand strategies to support veterans, military families, and service members to navigate career shifts. And then also we have two other webinars coming up on AI and recruitment. So those are coming up both in late May and in both late May and mid-May. And then we also have our thought-provoking and impactful certificate program coming up called an intersectional approach to career support and career development. We have a new cohort coming up halfway in May. So make sure that you want to join this with your team. There's a 10% group discount if you register 5 or more people. And this is a 6-week program helping practitioners apply anti-racist, anti-ableist, and trauma-informed strategies. If you want to learn about these webinars or any future webinar series coming up with CERIC, visit our website at ceric.ca/webinars. Again, thank you so much for joining our webinar today. We will be rejoined by both Ken Chatur and Lorena Carmego on June 2nd for our next webinar. Again, we'll send that link out to register if you haven't already. And I really want to officially conclude and thank you again, Ken, and the LMIC team behind the scenes who are helping us out today, and for everyone for your engagement in today's session. So with that, I want to wish you all a great rest of your day and see you in the next webinar.